Okay, it's 2 o'clock Central European Time. Welcome, everybody. I am recording this. I would like to start with saying that, and it will be published on YouTube later, unless I do any huge mistakes, which I don't think will happen. Anyhow, this is our first quarterly update. The idea is to do these webinars quarterly then, to go through new things since last webinar. Focus will be, of course, around power systems and IBMI. We will touch AIX and Linux stuff as well, of course, and go through recent announcement and other things that I think is of interest for people. I will start with introducing myself. So my name is Torbjörn Appel, which is a pretty cool name. It's very difficult for you non-Swedes at least to pronounce it. But I usually tell the story about it's actually two names, my first name. So it's Tor, the right spell guide to the left, and Björn, which means bear. Okay, so that's the grizzly bear and not the teddy bear. Someone said, that's a really awesome name. That's like Thunder Bear. Or you can just say Torbjörn, that works well also. Okay, a little bit about me before we continue with interesting stuff. I live up north in Sweden, as you can see on the map. It's pretty far up in the hemisphere, so it's still, well, not winter, but it's late winter then, early spring perhaps. At least April will be a spring month for us. About me then and the history, I worked for IBM. I started my career working for IBM actually in 1997. I worked for IBM between 1997 and 2008, and I've been working with different business partners in the region since, and also worked for a French DevOps company called Arcade Software for a few years. I started a Nordic business. Now I have my own company, Built on Power, that I started a year ago. I am a champion since 2016. I'm very honored to be that in that program. And also I've been very, very engaged in the community. So I was a board member of Common Sweden for 10 years, something like that. I was leader for 7 years. We did a lot of activities and creating conferences. We made a magazine, actually printed magazine around IBMI for many, many years. I was also a member of the Common Europe organization, the executive committee for the umbrella organization for the local user groups throughout Europe. I also started the IBMIcompetence.com website. It's a website where you can go in and find experts on the IBMI platform. This is a webinar, so, and I'm the only guy around, so there will be no time or possibility for me to answer any questions in the chat. So I'm happy to stay after if you want to discuss something. And also, again, you can always reach out to me whenever you want to. Okay, we'll go ahead. The agenda is like this, some highlights from the recent announcement. As I said, we will show something from our daily newsletter. I make a newsletter every, at least, working day that arrives in your mailbox at 10 o'clock Central European Time, Monday through Friday. Power 10, of course. What do we know so far? Upcoming events and activities to know about. Some overall news from the IBMI community. Also, I want to highlight some technologies that I think is good to know about and keeping an extra eye on, that I know many of you know a lot about already, but there is a huge lack of competence around new technologies, especially in the market, I would say. And we round up with some rumor control. I will tell later what that is. But to start with, I always want to start my sessions like this. IBM is the name of the platform today, right? It runs on IBM Power System, besides AIX and Linux. But I'm tired of hearing discussions about AS400, iSeries System I, i5, or even iOS, which is something completely different, right? We talk about IBM since 2008. This is kind of important for me. And also I want to show this, yes, this future is really, really strong. IBM is heavily focused on this platform, like AIX, and we'll talk about more about AIX soon, and of course the mainframe platform. And as you can see, there is a support roadmap that goes beyond, even outside of the spreadsheet, more or less. There will be supported versions coming out the next 15 plus years. And this doesn't say they're going to stop there, right? So it's this, the arrow is just moving to the right. Latest announcements. There were in February. They did some announcements, and we will go through them, the different areas. So the new logos, you've seen it already in the first slide. One of them. I hope you have seen them before as well. AIX new version announced, coming out later this year, and they will also celebrate 35 years since the announcement of AIX, and a new power hardware package, you can say. So the latest announcement, new logos or icons. IBM say this is not logos, it's icons, and there is, I guess, some differences, but we are using these, of course, when we talk about IBM. I like them. It was 2008, I think the old version came out. When they merged the P series and I series into the power systems. So I like them and start using them today. You can go to our website and download them. You can also reach out if you want an extra high resolution or any other versions. The Linux one, of course, you also have it in black, depending on your background. I needed to get the white one for this one. So AIX version 7.3, and not too many details in there for the moment. I would say I as a champion, we also have this NDA in place with IBM, so we know something that we cannot talk about, of course. And I can tell you there are some really, really cool stuff coming with 7.3. What is announced already is what you can see here. So. But it doesn't say the details. So enhanced live update capabilities, for example. It's been around for years when it comes to update the operating system live without rebooting, but that had some limitations. This is what I can say, I guess. But that will be fixed in a new version. And of course, support for Power 10 is something new, and when it comes to Power 10, there's a lot of new things happening. So there's, I guess, a lot happened in the development team for AIX, and I had to adapt for this. And of course, another bunch of other things. So cloud functionalities, and Ansible, of course, the acquisition for Red Hat brought, not at least Ansible, that is now bundled in 7.3, so you get it directly. Yes, and I will see what else we can talk about. I think that's enough. So keep this in mind. This will, I think the GA is at the end of the year. So I think there is some early, beta program going on right now. And if you're interested and you have a customer that should be interested in testing the application on version 7.3, reach out. There are some openings for that later in the summer and later on. They will celebrate, of course, as I mentioned, the 35th anniversary of AIX. There will happen a lot of things this year. There was a webinar earlier this week, right, in EMEA at least, where they did some pretty cool announcement that talk about the AIX. But there will be more things going on. 8th of April, there will be an webinar as well, as you can see, and there is a registration link in this PowerPoint. I will make sure you can get the links after this as well. Okay, X. What else in the latest announcements? I mentioned the hardware package. It's called the Private Cloud Rack. Some of you have been around for quite some time can see this looks a little bit similar to the Flex system they announced 5, 6, 7 years ago. But it's actually a bundled package with hardware and software and services around this, all in a package. So you buy it as a service, and then you don't have to do much more about it. So this, I guess, would be something on-prem but still cloud functionality. So this is something between your own machine and service they have in your data center, and, for example, the IBM Power in the cloud. We will see. But also they talked about Power 10, and always IBM is trying to balance how much they should focus on the next generation hardware, right? And of course, just like in the car vendor, I guess, they want people to buy Power 9 as well. Okay, so right now also, we will talk about it soon as well. We don't know much about the Power 10 servers, right, and configurations and so on. And also, Power 9 is still a damn good server. So they have a program in place right now. So if you invest in Power 9 already, you can upgrade to Power 10 when it comes later on. So don't hesitate. If you have a Power 8 or even older machine, go ahead and buy your Power 9 already and upgrade to Power 10 when they will be available. They will start with the bigger ones, the big servers, at the end of this year. So it's also good. It will take some time to get the smaller machines, I guess, late next year even. So that's kind of an announcement anyhow. Okay, I will talk about the daily newsletter. Actually, I wrote, I think, highlights from it, but it's difficult. So I will show you a little bit what they look like. This is from today's newsletter. Okay, so it's massive. It's difficult for me to highlight stuff. But the good thing is, which is kind of unique with our daily newsletter, is that you select your areas of interest. So IBM General and AIX, IBM Power Systems, Linux, mainframe stuff, and storage. And the good thing is you will get your unique combination in one newsletter. Okay, we have a bunch of people actually just looking for IBM stuff. Some days there will be a short newsletter, but on the other hand, we have some that have interest in all areas. And these newsletters are pretty comprehensive. So, but I think it's a good idea to subscribe for them. It makes you updated all the time, right? So I've created them from 150 different sources, or even more now, maybe 170 today, using the RSS functionality. And then I go through every morning. I start with a cup of coffee and go through the news since yesterday and mark them into the different categories. And also, it's a lot of things happening out there, which is one of the key messages, which is very, very good, of course, especially when it comes to IBMI and AX and so on. You don't read much about it in the general media, right? Or on IDG or anything like that. So this is an alternative for you. Okay, Power 10. What do we know so far? Also, I want to make this note. There is this information about the ship itself, more or less, not about the systems. As I said, they will start shipping, well, there will be an announcement later this year, okay, about the servers themselves, the P1080 or 1022, whatever they're going to be called. So this is just short about the announcement. They announced the ship Power 10 in August last year. And there was a lot of information going back then, of course. Not so much since, but there are some new things and some things that I want to highlight. And there is a lot of companies that are really, really looking forward to this. Power 10 is actually, they made a huge investment in the architecture. Not just it's small, it's on the 7 nanometer processor technology, which is unique, but the overall architecture of the chip itself. Some things that would be very, very cool, I think, and there is a lot of fuss about it, is the memory cluster. Okay, they call it memory inception. On a very high level, this means you can now share memory between different servers. So for example, you can buy one big server and have petabyte of memory in that one, and then you can share with satellite servers around this with not so much memory in them, and you can share. So application can run on different machines, right? So which creates a lot of flexibility, of course. And you have already the different pooling technology on power that is unique compared to x86 alternatives, right? So CPU and everything else. So that's very, very cool. And also the AI stuff. There is a lot of focus on this, but they say they're going to be 20 times faster with AI on Power 9. Depending on what kind of AI you're doing, there are different ways, and sometimes GPUs are used and sometimes they're not. But there is, it's going to be a monster, the Power 10 servers for sure. Yeah, you have some other info on this one, but we will also put together, if you're more interested in the details, on our website, I put on the menu, you have Power 10, all you need to know. There's all the links, more or less, at least the good ones that I found. And I put them on there so you can read for yourself. But I expect to have much more later on this year. Okay, we're going on pretty fast, which is, I think, due to, this is a monologue, more or less. No one else is stealing my time. Okay, what's up? Or upcoming events to know about. Obviously, everything went virtual, right? Which I think has been a really, really, well, interesting and good journey. So if you remember a year ago, when they started doing it, it was not very good. So think, for example, IBM, the huge conference that was going to be held in US as planned, they didn't, right? So they had to, in panic, more or less, in a few weeks' time, do a virtual conference. Not very well arranged, if you ask me. I can speak openly about this, but it was, trying to do something physical into online. It's not the best way to do it. But what happened since, a lot of things has evolved. So just different platforms where you can do only virtual, which is a good thing. But of course, hybrid has been also happening. Just recently, they did a hybrid event in UK a couple of weeks ago, which is interesting to see what's coming in the future. Okay, but on this list is mainly virtual events. So the IBM Think will be total virtual in May. Smaller, of course, but worth to visit because there is so much in there. And this is also a good thing that they will reach much more people than they are that can go and travel to the United States. Common Navigate, May 24th through 26th. I think there will be 250 plus shorter sessions, 20-minute sessions. Actually, I'm happy to do 3 of them out of the 250 plus. So maybe it's 253, I don't know. Of course, around focus on IBMI and power systems in general. Common Europe plan to do their annual Common Europe Congress in June, but I, of course, also have to do something different. The plan is to do a virtual event in June instead, and then move the Common Europe to November and do a hybrid one, where there will be, the plan is at least to do a conference in Copenhagen, but also do it virtually in combination. Also worth to mention Common Insight, another set of webinars in July from Common North America. And then, so the fall, of course, we don't know what's it's going to look like in the fall, but Power Up, they plan to do this in Virginia Beach. The annual, normally the big one is in the spring, right? Now they move the big one to October. And as usually they do in parallel, they have this IT executive conference. So it's in parallel, at least a couple of days in parallel, where you can join as an executive or send an executive from your company. This is a really, really good event for executives, where they can sit down together with IBM executives and share experience and have questions and so on. The RPG and DB2 Summit, worth to mention for developers. They did one event this week, so it ends today, I think. Maybe it is even going on today. So take a look. You might have a chance to they of course are recording them. So go ahead and look if you still can register for the summit. It's worth to do. Okay, so some other things from the communities. Another thing that happens is webinars. So there is a lot out there for the moment. A lot from which is from our relative, of course, but from the IBMI side of things. So I Talk with TUI has been around since long, right? Paul TUI do interviews. It's been for many, many years. So that's not new, but it's still going on. A new one from Common is the Incredible Eye Show. They do, I think they announce a new guest every week, more or less now. Really, really good as well. iPower is, I like to mention them because they do a lot of, not just webinars, but they publish a lot of videos. It's a lot about hardware and system admin functions, but really, really short videos teaching you things on power systems and IBMI. A new webinar is Tech Talk SMB, where Charlie Guarino is the host. He did a good number already, interviews with people from the IBMI community, worth to listen to. Also, Charlie do the iShine, and I'm helping him with this. I'm his sidekick, where he invites, well, everyone who wants to join, right? But it's a more informal hangout thing where there's a guest that talks about the topic, but maybe do some demos or show what they've been doing, or kind of interview as well. But there is also room for chat and social talking and questions and so on. Really, really appreciated. I think we've been around 70, 80 participants. And Frank Soltis was the guest in January, I think, who was the chief architect for the AS400. And he had some really, really interesting things to talk about. Okie dokie. So, some technologies you should know about and keep an extra eye on. This is actually this is a big list, and which is, I think, is a good thing. Depends, of course, where you are in the ecosystem, right? Developer or system admin or whatever. But there is so much that is going on, which is very, very good, right? But it's also important that we keep the skills up, so we know what's happening, what's going on the platform. So, for example, RPG. I still talk to ISVs. I forgot to say that in the beginning. I work for IBM and helping them and reaching out to the ecosystem of ISVs in Europe. And I can tell majority, of course, is very good, using the latest technology and latest tools, but very many of them are not. It's sad to say, but they are still old school RPG developers. They complain about the difficulties to find RPG developers, which it is if you're still on RPG 3 or 400, RPG 400 or old versions of RPG. Make sure that you convert, make sure you're using the modern tooling and so on, and know what this means, right? Because it's also much easier to find a Java developer that wants to learn full free-form RPG. It's similar to Java, and the market is bigger for them. But other things like Ansible, there's a lot of talk since the acquisition of Red Hat. Ansible is automation engine, so also very important in the DevOps area. So please take some time, read and join IBM when they do, because they do a lot of webinars around this. IBM in Montpellier has great skills on this, and they do workshops where you can learn more about Ansible. As you can see, Visual Studio Code is another thing. It's a Microsoft Visual Studio, right? But it's the version that runs on Linux. And also there are nowadays plugins from the open source community for IBM developers. So this is an alternative to RDI, perhaps. You should know about it. It's possible today to develop on IBM using Visual Studio Code, which is a very popular platform on other platforms, right? So .NET and Java coders are using this. They know how to do it. Looks like what the environment they are used to working. Other thing to worth names when mentioned in general Linux, I would say, and containers, right? I don't say you should convert your RPG DB2 applications to containers. Okay, some do, which I think is pretty stupid. But there will be containers in the future side by side with your IBM environment. Instead of thinking of you have your IBM RPG COBOL application in the backend, and then you have today already a surrounding service on Windows, for example, .NET Core running on Windows servers. And in the future, there will most likely be containerized applications. And the good thing is you can run them on Power, at least if the developers are doing things right from the beginning, which means you can reduce the number of physical servers and go back to have your core on IBM, and then install a Linux, a Red Hat server, for example, and put the containers in the environment on the same machine. Other things to worth mention, of course, open source. It's a lot of things happening on the open source side of things. Again, I don't think the open source will replace the RPG and COBOL applications, but they, just like containers, they will enhance your environment, right? So, and if there is a functionality you wanted, maybe for a short period of time, and it's already out there as an open source package, well, download it in minutes on IBMI. You don't need to spin up in another environment in Linux. In this case, you don't need a Linux operating system for it. Just download it to your IBMI environment, which, as we know, it runs securely, right? It's isolated and all that. So open source, very cool stuff. AI and machine learning. So now they start talking about enterprise AI, I think they call it. We heard, so for many years we heard what you can do with AI. Oh, they can create music, they can make a cookbook, right? We remember when Watson, they did this Watson cookbook. Yeah, but what does it help my business? But now it comes. So in the future we will see, and I know already there are some really cool experiments going on, and where we can see that IBMI actually is a really good platform to do your AI. One of the reasons is single level storage. AI loves memory, and this is coming back to the Power 10 the memory design, right? How they designed the chip and everything. Single level storage helps a lot when it comes to AI. And we've heard stories from another champion in Belgium, Koen de Cortes, and his son is doing cool stuff that is actually even faster on his IBMI partition than on a GPU-based power box running Linux. So keep an eye on AI and look what you can do for your business, because the data is there. We have all the data, the business data on IBMI already. So do the AI where the data is, to avoid shipping data from, especially from a server to another, right? Some other things that were to mention, x86 versus Power. I really think as many as possible should know the difference, because there is a lot of differences. I have another presentation around this where I compare x86 to Power and also the operating system, Windows, for example, versus IBMI. So Power together with IBMI is built for business applications to start with, right? x86 and Windows, actually that's a workstation. Unix was the workstation operating system, and x86 was for single user, one CPU, right? One PC, one person. And now everything we can see in the cloud, they are solving issues we never had on the IBMI side with multi-user applications and so on. It is really cool when you start digging into the details. And it's important to, from my point of view at least, to know what the difference is. .NET, I just say Java and .NET. A lot of things are happening around this, not the least when it comes because of cloud and cloud native things. And when you start doing microservices and containerized applications, Java, as it looks today, or looked at least in history, doesn't fit well there. Okay, .NET, they're moving to the open source platform, so you can run .NET code on Linux and even on IBMI today, not supported though, but the Mono open source project, you can do it. And maybe in the future we can have it supported, who knows. Okay, there is a lot actually, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but please keep yourself updated and make sure you at least know what it overall view of what the technology is about. Okay, we actually soon going to end this webinar. Rumor control. Well, I tried to make it a little bit funny. You see, it's from the movie Alien 3, and this guy said, "This is rumor control. Here are the facts." There are even more rumors, but the problem with NDA, I'm not even allowed to ask them. I'm not allowed to play stupid, right? So I will go through just the things that we can talk about, and maybe some new things that you don't know about today, which maybe is not a rumor in the first place. So knowledge center, for example, misspelled here. It will go away. Well, it will. So, but the document will not be deleted. They will move to IBM Docs instead. I guess there will be a big announcement on this very soon. So all the documents, you will find all the information, but they will be on IBM Docs instead. Rumor number 2, which is pretty new. It's in for M3, which is a ERP package. Actually, it was Swedish to begin with. This is why it may be a little bit closer to my heart. It was called MoveX back then, and now Infor owns it, and the name is M3. And they had for many years cloud first strategy. And they, of course, have a cloud strategy like everybody else has, the same for SAP and so on. But the good thing is, the bad thing before was they always put the new functionality, new features and functions in the cloud version. So companies running on-prem on their own machine, not well. At least I think before it was 80% run their application on IBM. So it's a lot. Still, maybe not 80% today, but many customers are running on IBM, and they were happy with it, but they didn't get the latest functional features. Now they will. So this is really good news, and I hope there will be a lot of activities going on later this year when the software is out and so on. Rumor number 3, IBM version 7.1 is completely dead. Well, some part of me hope it was, but you can continue running it. Some companies obviously has issue with upgrading to newer, supported version of operating system, but now you can get support running on selected Power 9 servers. So if you have still on your company 7.1, I hope not, but if you know anyone or customer running on old hardware, maybe Power 5, I don't know, make sure that they can buy a Power 9 box and get all the rich functionality in Power 9 and still run 7.1. Hopefully while still trying to upgrade to 7.3 or 7.4. Rumor number 4, Ansible again. Ansible Tower cannot run on Power System. Well, that is correct actually. For the moment you need an x86 server to run the Ansible Tower. But the good thing is there is an engine, so kind of client, and that runs very well on Power, Linux, AX, and not at least IBM. Quite sure we will see support on to run the Tower on Power as well. There's so much activities going on to make sure that all the Red Hat software stack is running optimized on Power as well. Rumor number 5, IBM Magazine is dead. Well, actually, the IBM Magazine is dead, but long live Tech Channel. So Tech Channel was the company behind IBM Magazine. Of course, they didn't just lay down and die on this, so they started the Tech Channel. And one of the things they do is the webinar we talked about. And they produce a lot of good articles and blogs and so on. So also I include them in my daily newsletter. So hopefully you will see that already. IBM, I would say, also moving from IBM Magazine, they started the community instead, and pointing to that, where this is where Steve Will, for example, produces his his blog. IBM are moving all videos from YouTube. Partly true. I'm not sure about it. They still publish thing, I think, but there is many big companies are moving away from YouTube for, I guess, some legal reasons and some other things. So IBM has done a tremendous job in moving things to Media Center on their own domain. Good and bad. The bad thing is it's not that easy to find. It's not that easy to share as it was on YouTube, I would say. The good thing, I found a lot of really, really good educational things that was on YouTube, but I didn't know about. Before I'm leaving you, this is about SolarWinds. So this is the huge hack that was going on for a long period of time even, but is one of the biggest, maybe the biggest cyber attack in the history. And there was just an article in Tech Radar, I think, about this, and it's interesting from where I stand. The reason was it's very, very difficult to keep the security when you have this intermixed supply chain of technology vendors. So there have so many different vendors and so many different platforms, and of course different clouds, right? And it's getting more and more complex. And we see this every week. This is also the cloud native things and the cloud containers. Well, it's good, of course, that you can move around things, but I usually say we don't want to move around, right? We want this optimized stack. So keep it on Power. If you cannot get everything on IBM, you can at least get it on Linux, on Power, or AIX on the side, right? So keep complexity down and think about what your really, what the needs are, right? Scalability, yeah, we can scale on Power. We don't need 14 servers to scale things like you need on x86. We don't have the issues and problems. As I said before, so this is just something I want to give you to think about and maybe spread the word. There are alternatives out there. Maybe IBM should go to the, well, of course they do go to the bigger companies that talk about this. To have fewer vendors is good most of the time. Okay, this is it. 42 minutes, that was pretty fast. It was very difficult for me to see where should I draw the line, because this is the first one, right? So the next one I will just go back to this presentation and see what happened since, right? So I'm not going to repeat the stuff, and hopefully it's going to be maybe even shorter, just for you so easily can keep yourself again updated and know what's happening. Okay, thank you everybody for attending. Again, it's been recorded, so I will publish it on YouTube later on. Thank you everybody.